Subnautica is rated everyone 10 plus by ESRB, which is a surprise to most considering
Stay away, he's coming right for us!
But as it turns out, the lassophobia causing leviathans aren't the scariest or even the most disturbing aspect of this rating. When you dive deeper into the vast, dark pit that is Subnautica's lore and history, you'll soon uncover some deeply disturbing facts that make Subnautica's leviathans look like my new pet mouse. In this video, I found, in my opinion, the 10 most disturbing of these facts, and I'm going to be sharing them with you right now, starting with the fact that dolphins in the Subnautica universe are actually extinct. In the PDA entry for the Cuddlefish, we learn that we do know that the Cuddlefish is an herbivore which displays highly social behavior in its interspecies interactions. As was observed in Earth dolphins before their extinction, this creature seems to understand the concept of other minds. No further elaboration on the dolphin's extinction is given anywhere else in Subnautica's lore, leaving us to wonder how it came to be. As it turns out, according to the IUCN's Red List of Threatened Species, of the 41 dolphin species that exist, 5 species and 6 subspecies are endangered. So it is actually realistically possible for this to occur at some point in the future. At the surface level, this doesn't seem that disturbing, but once you dive in even further, it only gets worse from here. How on earth were no dolphins kept alive in captivity? Approximately 2,000 dolphins are kept in captivity as it stands right now. What caused all of these creatures to perish along with the 8 million or so dolphins that live in the wild? Well, there's actually a very plausible explanation that would account for both the dolphins in captivity and the dolphins in the wild, and it has to do with nuclear war. That is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, so be sure to stick around to the end of the video where I'll discuss that in depth. There is a popular theory that's been circling throughout the Subnautica community for many years now that states that the person who plays in Subnautica, Riley Robinson, is actually dead. Here's how the theory goes. In the opening cutscene of Subnautica, Riley Robinson is struck by a metal panel which, according to the game's lore, knocked him out for 3 hours, during which time everyone else who survived the Aurora's crash perished. But what if, instead of knocking him out, the metal panel that struck Riley Robinson actually killed him? According to the general medical community, a moderate traumatic brain injury is typically characterized by 30 minutes or more of unconsciousness, but patients regain consciousness within 24 hours. For 10% of people, this injury is fatal. Seeing that the 3 hours of unconsciousness experienced by Riley fits within this classification, there is also a 10% chance that Riley could have been killed. That is, of course, assuming that the 3-hour metric isn't entirely made up. Wait, I'm sure you're asking, what do you even mean by that? And if this were the case, how would we play as Riley Robinson in Subnautica? Well, as the theory goes, the AI intelligence on board the Aurora was still very much alive after the crash and couldn't bear the thought of being completely alone for an eternity, or at least until it ran out of power since everyone died in the Aurora's crash. Using drones very similar to those used by the mobile vehicle Bay, it collected Riley's body from his wrecked life pod, and it was delighted to discover that, unlike all of the other bodies it had collected, Riley's was almost entirely intact and had not been eaten by the creatures that roam 4546b. Using his mostly intact body, it was able to reconstruct his mind, which it then placed inside of a simulation where it could be endlessly entertained with him for as long as it had power. And so, all of the events in Subnautica are a simulation, which explains several things that don't make sense about Subnautica, such as why there are no dead bodies inside of the wrecked life pods or the Aurora, and why the radiation from the Aurora didn't affect the environment in a more realistic way. Basically, every single plot hole or aspect of Subnautica that doesn't make sense is because it's a computer-generated simulation. However, the reconstruction of Riley's mind is far from perfect. You may have noticed that throughout Subnautica, Riley Robinson never speaks once, only making noises when breathing or taking damage. Although this could have been used by the developers to increase player immersion, it's also possible that the Aurora AI was unable to fully reconstruct his brain, leaving him unable to speak. This failure of a complete reconstruction would likely be due to the head injury he sustained from the metal panel. What I find the most interesting about this theory is that if this is true, we don't actually know what the planet the Aurora crashed on is like. It's possible that the environment is completely different, or maybe it's similar and the Aurora AI took the environment and tweaked it slightly. Perhaps the radiation from the Aurora did devastate the surrounding ecosystems in real life like it should have, but this was not incorporated into the simulation. And what would have actually caused the Aurora to crash? Would it have still been the quarantine enforcement platform? It's entirely up to your imagination, as there are endless possibilities. When Riley dies inside of the simulation, the AI simply revives him and allows him to continue playing. After all, it doesn't want to be lonely. It takes pleasure in seeing him scurry across the crater, collecting resources and solving the story it has constructed for him. And so, Riley Robinson's mind is left alive for as long as the Aurora maintains power, endlessly playing a pointless simulated game in order to pleasure a dying AI. If that's not disturbing, I don't know what is. Another related theory is that the events in Subnautica take place in Riley Robinson's dreams and he has still yet to wake up. This is a little bit more of a stretch, but it's definitely possible. Perhaps Riley entered a coma-like state when the metal panel struck him, and he will continue dreaming until he eventually dies. This would also mean we don't actually know what the planet the Aurora crashed on is actually like, since the 4546b in Subnautica would be entirely constructed by Riley's imagination. It's truly fascinating to think about. If you've ever traveled to the crater edge in Subnautica, you may have noticed a very slight vibration in your hands and sea glide, which is not present in the safe shallows. And as you continue to travel deeper into the void, taking yourself farther and farther from the center of the world, the shaking only continues to get worse. At some point, you'll reach an invisible wall and be teleported back to the safe shallows. But before this wall was added to the game, I was actually able to record footage of what happens once you pass beyond the wall. The vibration continues to get worse and worse the farther you go. It gets to the point where you can hardly even recognize your arms and legs anymore, and eventually they completely disappear. So what on earth causes such a bizarre thing to occur? Well, it has to do with the game engine Subnautica was created in, Unity. As it turns out, this is just an issue with the game engine itself, not Subnautica. The exact reasoning for why this happens is a little complex, but I'll do my best to summarize. Unity stores the positional values of game objects in something called single precision floating point format. This format for storing object locations works totally fine with small positional values, such as those near the center of the world. But as you travel farther from the center, rounding errors in this specific format cause the objects to be slightly positionally misplaced. This causes the weird jittery vibration, which is particularly noticeable in animations. And the effects of these rounding errors increase the further you travel from the world's center, to the point where the player model is unrecognizable. So next time you travel to the crater edge and notice the vibration, just remember that the literal fabric of the game is starting to break and will only get worse the further you travel. Subnautica is home to some incredibly large lifeforms such as the Sea Emperor Leviathan, which is a baffling size of approximately 200 meters in length. But what if I told you that Subnautica creatures are actually much larger than you think? Much larger than they appear in game. This is the size of a peeper compared to your hand while playing the game in first person as you normally would. And this is the size of a peeper compared to your body shown using console commands. As you can see, there's a drastic difference between the intended size of the peeper, which can be seen as you normally play Subnautica, and how big it actually is when you compare it to the human body. In other words, there's a huge discrepancy between the intended size of Subnautica creatures and their actual size. I'd like to show you a couple of examples of Subnautica creature size that will absolutely blow your mind. While I'm doing so, I'd like you to try and imagine what it would be like to see these in real life while swimming in the ocean. Replace the human body used as a size reference with your own. I must warn you, it's quite terrifying. First off, here are how the stalker and sand shark compare to the human body. Here is the true size of a cave crawler and blood crawler, which seriously surprised me the first time I saw this. Here's how an ampheel compares to the human body. And this is the Reaper Leviathan compared to the human body. Here's a Sea Dragon Leviathan compared to the human body. It is absolutely insane how small we are compared to this thing. Here's how the Sea Emperor Leviathan compares to the human body. And then finally, here's the Gargantuan Leviathan skeleton compared to the human body. Literally, one of its teeth is larger than your entire body. If that isn't disturbing, I have no idea what is. At one point in time during the early access days of Subnautica, there used to be an Easter egg PDA voice line that would have a very small chance of playing upon entering the SeaMoth. This was very similar to the voice line that can occur when entering the Cyclops, which says,
"You are the best captain on the planet. I'm not even squiddy."
However, the SeaMoth voice line wasn't exactly family friendly. I'm not even sure if it really is appropriate for this channel, but for the sake of a complete accurate video, here's how it went.
I love it when you come inside me.
Obviously, I'm not going to elaborate on this any further, but I think it's pretty safe to say that a line like this in a game intended for people's ages 10 and older is slightly disturbing, and definitely not appropriate, which is why the voice line was later removed. All of this points back to a time when Subnautica didn't used to be as family friendly as it is today. At one point in time, all of Subnautica's blood used to be red as well, but this was also changed to meet the developers' desired rating. And it definitely makes you wonder how much more dark and disturbing this game could have been had the developers not wanted the game to be E10+. I'm about to show you a piece of concept art that once you see it, it is impossible to unsee. So please mentally and emotionally prepare yourselves. This image is an official piece of concept art for the Crashfish. But it isn't the red Crashfish model we all deeply hate that is present in the picture. Instead, it would seem that at one point in time the Cuddlefish was intended to act like the Crashfish, in that it would jump out of its nest once you were nearby and attempt to explode as near to you as possible. It's quite traumatizing to learn that the in-game pets many people have developed emotional connections to were intended to be such frustrating creatures. And as for why such a cute model will be used for such an abysmal creature, I have absolutely no idea. We can only be incredibly thankful that the developers decided to switch out the model. The new model definitely fits the Crashfish position much better, and the old Cuddlefish model definitely fits the pet position quite well. But it still makes you wonder what it would have been like to see such a cute fish swim up to you only to explode in your face, killing you instantly. Within the primary containment facility's antechamber or central room, a collection of 11 relics can be found kept within precursor cases. One of these relics is known as the translation device. Upon scanning it, we receive a PDA entry that reads, "This device stores linguistic data from over 1,000 different languages. The core of the device may allow alien text to be read and translated. Analysis of the onboard data reveals a number of ancient Earth languages, and the term CHBCLive appears many times in the device's data. Its importance is unclear. The device seems to be configured to translate into the designer's language. It will not work the other way around." The mention of the term CHBCLive appearing in the device's data is a tribute to a Chinese Subnautica player going by that name. He started playing the game following the farming update, and uploaded tutorials and gameplay videos to his Bilibili channel. For reference, Bilibili is the Chinese version of YouTube. He also played a massive role in translating Subnautica into the Chinese language, allowing many other Chinese gamers to partake in this wonderful game. Unfortunately, before Subnautica could be completed, CHBCLive died after a long battle with gastric cancer. As a result, the Subnautica developers added this Easter egg as a tribute in a rather fitting manner. May he rest in peace. There is a specific spot in the lava zone where if somebody were to accidentally or intentionally glitch out of bounds, they would immediately notice a large square box located directly beneath them. This box can also be observed upon constructing a scanner room in the general area, and similar structures can also be found through scanner rooms in various other locations of the map. The appearance of these structures is quite unusual. The walls appear to be see-through on one side and visible on the other. For example, you can see this wall on the left right now, but when you head over this way, it completely disappears, which can, in some cases, make you completely oblivious to its existence in the first place. And when you attempt to travel through the walls, you uncover a disturbing truth. Once you travel through the wall, you cannot travel back through the other way. There's no going back. You've entered the Subnautica Backrooms. You suddenly find yourself in a pitch-black environment surrounded by nothingness on either side. The light from the lava zone is completely gone. Your only guide is the walls, which constantly change in texture as you continue to explore. If you're in survival, you won't last long. However, if you have a submersible or are in creative, your hopes are a little better. As you continue to explore, you'll soon notice a couple of things. Firstly, the biome you're in constantly changes, which causes the music, ambience, and color of the water to also change. Secondly, in most areas there is literally nothing beneath you, nothing but empty void. But there are walls preventing you from traveling up back to your home in the crater. It's almost taunting you, daring you to travel into the nothingness below. Thirdly, many of the walls share a similar texture, a texture you may have seen before. The texture for the walls in the void. And as you continue to explore, you might eventually reach the void. That is your only escape. And if you're in survival, you aren't likely to survive from here on out. You see, the Subnautica Backrooms are really just the bottom of the world. They were put in place following the Big Little update on November 5th, 2019, in which the void was also drastically changed. But why on earth do the Subnautica Backrooms exist? Why isn't the bottom of the world just completely flat? Why does it change in height and occasionally have flat areas where you can literally build bases? Why does it feel like an intentionally designed maze? Is this some sort of cruel joke from the developers? Well, I have absolutely no idea. It doesn't really make any sense to me. It's almost meant to be a mystery. But to think that those who strayed out of bounds in the wrong area could end up in a dark, lonely maze where they will likely not survive, well, that's definitely disturbing. After the Aurora explodes in Subnautica, the player automatically receives the blueprint for their radiation suit. Upon receiving this blueprint, the player also receives a PDA entry that reads, "This suit fully protects against the effects of radiation during land, sea, and space exploration. Safety rated up to 40 sieverts per hour. Cross-compatible with all AEP suit functionality. Sleek." Following this relatively normal description at the very bottom of the PDA entry, we're also given an Alteran catchphrase which appears at the bottom of many of Subnautica's tools and equipment. However, this one is a little bit more disturbing than normal. It reads, "The radiation suit, a necessary precaution in a post-MAD world." The acronym MAD, or MAD, stands for Mutually Assured Destruction. It's generally used when talking about nuclear war. Essentially, the reason a nuclear war hasn't broken out yet is because if one country with nuclear bombs were to launch nukes at another country with nuclear bombs, the country they're launching the nukes at would launch nuclear bombs right back at them. By launching nuclear bombs at another country with nuclear bombs, you're basically nuking yourself. This means that if for some reason a worldwide nuclear war were to break out, both sides would be completely obliterated by the bombs because every nuke launched by one side would be matched by the other side, leading to mutually assured destruction. And so, this catchphrase at the bottom of the entry suddenly becomes incredibly disturbing. It's saying that the radiation suit is essential in a post-mutually assured destruction world. Why would they mention something like this unless mutually assured destruction has already occurred at some point in time? Well, here is where the rabbit hole goes even deeper. It is very likely that the mutually assured destruction as a result of a nuclear war occurred on our home planet Earth. The radioactive fallout would transform it into a hostile wasteland, necessitating a radiation suit for any human who sets foot on the planet, and thus initiating this Alteran catchphrase for the radiation suit. But not only would a devastating nuclear war explain the radiation suit's PDA entry, it would also explain the extinction of dolphins like we talked about earlier. Both dolphins in captivity and those in the wild would be affected by a global nuclear war, probably leading to their extinction. And if dolphins went extinct as a result of nuclear war, it's likely that the majority of other species living on Earth also went extinct in the Subnautica universe. This is the disturbing reality of Subnautica's lore, that Earth no longer exists as we know it today. Another interesting thing that nuclear war would explain is the existence of transgovs in the Subnautica universe. A transgov is defined by the PDA entry known as the Charter as an independent authority in de facto control of at least one solar system and phase gate. But I've always found the existence of these transgovs quite confusing. I always thought that if space travel advanced to the point it has in the Subnautica universe, the people in charge would be the governments of Earth that simply expanded into space. But what if that was the case? You see, if a global nuclear war were to have occurred, suddenly the existence of transgovs makes total sense. In the chaotic aftermath of the nuclear war, the transgovs would have formed as the governing bodies, controlling the space territories once occupied by Earth governments. Most of these transgovs would have originated from old governments such as the Mongolian independent states, but many would have been completely new and would have combined old governments to form a new, more powerful transgov. For example, Altera is likely to be one such transgov. This new understanding also makes you quite curious as to what would have caused such a nuclear war, and at what point in time it occurred. It would have definitely occurred after the expansion into space, simply because if it happened before that, then the expansion into space would have likely never happened. Overall though, it's definitely quite disturbing to realize that in the Subnautica universe, Earth has been rendered a toxic wasteland with most of its species completely extinct. The Geneva Convention was the agreement of governments to a list of treaties following World War II that established international standards for humanitarian treatment during war, such as the basic rights of wartime prisoners, civilians, and military personnel, the protection of the wounded and sick, and the protection of civilians in and around a war zone. Basically, as counterintuitive as this might seem, it provides the rules for war. rules to killing other human beings. But what does any of this have to do with Subnautica? Well, as some of you might remember, at one point in time, Subnautica actually used to have first aid kits with a red cross on top of a white background. And according to Article 44 of the convention, the emblem of the red cross on a white background and the words Red Cross or Geneva Cross may not be employed either in time of peace or in time of war, except to indicate or to protect the medical units and establishments, the personnel and material protected by the present convention, and other conventions dealing with similar matters. Additionally, Article 53 says, the use by individuals, societies, firms, or companies either public or private, other than those entitled thereto under the present convention, of the emblem or designation Red Cross or Geneva Cross, or any sign or designation constituting an imitation thereof, whatever the object of such use, and irrespective of the date of its adoption, shall be prohibited at all times. In other words, at one point in time, Subnautica used to violate the Geneva Convention by having an emblem of a red cross on their first aid kits that didn't designate any of the aforementioned things. Specifically, in Article 53, the convention states that companies are not allowed to use the symbol for commercial use, and one could argue that it was definitely being used that way in this situation. I did a little bit of digging and was able to find that the Red Cross organization actively contacts media producers, such as video game developers, and asks them to cease using the symbol. Whether or not they actually contacted Unknown Worlds is unknown, but it's entirely possible that they were in some sort of legal trouble for using the symbol. Fortunately, following Subnautica's big little update, the red cross on a white background was changed to a white cross on a green background, meaning the game no longer violated the Geneva Convention. Strangely enough, this change was not mentioned anywhere in the changelog for the update, and perhaps this was done intentionally. After all, it's quite disturbing to learn that a game rated to be played by children ages 10 and up could have committed what's essentially a war crime. Let me know in the comment section down below if you have any other Subnautica facts that you think should have made the list. Thanks so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video.